The frozen exile. The transport ship Meridian had been nothing more than twisted metal and scattered debris for 6 days now. Zara Voss pressed her back against the makeshift shelter she'd built from salvaged hull plating, watching her breath form crystal clouds in the thin air of Keth 7. The ice planet hadn't been on any inhabited world registry, just a waypoint for fuel depot coordinates that no longer mattered. Her fingers, wrapped in strips torn from her thermal underlayer, worked steadily on the small device in her lap. The emergency beacon had been damaged in the crash, its circuits fried by the electromagnetic pulse that had brought down the Meridian in the first place. But Zara had spent 12 years as a systems engineer on frontier worlds. She knew how to make broken things work again. The wind howled across the crystalline wasteland, carrying ice particles that stung like needles. Through the transparent aluminum panel she'd rigged as a windscreen, Zara could see the aurora dancing across Keth 7's twin moons. Beautiful and utterly indifferent to her survival. She'd rationed the emergency supplies carefully. 2 nutrition bars remained, along with half a bottle of recycled water. The heating unit had failed on day 3, forcing her to improvise with the ship's backup power cells. Every calorie counted now. Every degree of warmth was precious. A sound cut through the wind, different from the constant moan of air through ice canyons. Zara lifted her head, listening. There it was again, a low harmonic tone that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. Not mechanical, organic. She sealed the beacon's casing and tucked it into her jacket. Against every survival, instinct screaming at her to stay put, Zara stepped out into the killing cold. The sound was coming from deeper in the ice field, where jagged formations created a maze of frozen towers and hidden crevasses. Her boots crunched through the snow as she followed the intermittent tone. It grew stronger as she approached a particularly large ice formation, its surface smooth as polished glass. The sound was definitely coming from inside. Zara circled the formation until she found a crack wide enough to squeeze through. The passage led downward into a natural cavern, carved by centuries of wind and temperature shifts. And there, suspended in a web of crystalline growth, was something that shouldn't exist. The being was roughly humanoid, but clearly not human. Its skin had a translucent quality like living crystal, and patterns of bioluminescent veins pulsed weakly beneath the surface. It hung motionless in the ice web, and Zara realized with a start that the harmonic sound was coming from the creature itself. A distress call. Most people would have backed away, would have returned to their shelter and pretended they'd never seen anything. But Zara had spent her career bringing dead systems back to life, and she recognized the sound of something dying. She approached carefully, noting the being's breathing, shallow but steady. Frost had formed around the edges of what might have been wounds, and the bioluminescent patterns were fading. Whatever this creature was, it was in the final stages of hypothermia. "Can you understand me?" Zara asked softly. The being's head moved slightly, and she caught a glimpse of eyes like faceted gems. Intelligence flickered there, along with something that might have been surprise. The creature made a sound, not the same harmonic distress call, but something more complex. Almost like speech, though Zara couldn't understand the meaning. She held up her hands, showing empty palms. "I'm going to help you," she said, though she had no idea how. The ice web holding the being looked natural, but closer inspection revealed it was actually some kind of organic cocoon. The creature had wrapped itself in this protective shell, but something had gone wrong. Zara retreated to her shelter and gathered what supplies she could spare. The portable heater, her last functional power cell, and the medical kit from the ship's emergency stores. If she was going to save this being, she'd have to risk her own survival to do it. Back in the cavern, she set up the heater and aimed it at the ice cocoon. The crystalline web began to soften and crack. The being's eyes opened fully, watching her with what seemed like disbelief. When sections of the cocoon fell away, Zara could see the extent of the creature's injuries. Cuts along its torso leaked a silver fluid that crystallized in the cold. Its left arm was bent at an unnatural angle, but most concerning were the dark patches spreading across its translucent skin, signs of severe tissue damage from prolonged cold exposure. Zara used the medical kit scanner to get basic readings. The being's physiology was unlike anything in the database, but she could identify critical systems failing. Its core temperature was dropping below sustainable levels. Without hesitation, she removed her own thermal jacket and wrapped it around the creature's torso. The being made a sound of protest, gesturing weakly at Zara's now exposed arms, but she shook her head. "You need this more than I do right now," she said, securing the jacket's heating elements around the being's chest. The creature's bioluminescent patterns began to strengthen as warmth reached its core. Over the next several hours, Zara worked tirelessly to stabilize her unexpected patient. She used the emergency medical supplies to clean and seal the worst wounds, fashioned a splint for the broken arm using salvaged metal from her shelter, and shared half of her remaining water ration. The being watched her every move with growing wonder. When it tried to refuse the water, Zara simply left the bottle within reach and pretended not to notice when it drank. As the creature's condition improved, it began to communicate more effectively. It pointed to itself and made a complex sound that Zara approximated as Thekmor. She pointed to herself and said, "Zara," several times until the being repeated it with remarkable accuracy. Thekmor gestured to the walls of the cavern, and Zara saw that they were covered in symbols she hadn't noticed before. Mathematical formulas, star charts, what looked like technical diagrams. This wasn't just a shelter, it was some kind of research station. Through a combination of gestures and drawings in the frost, Thekmor explained what had happened. A storm had damaged their equipment and trapped them in the cavern. The cocoon was an emergency survival mechanism, but it was only meant to sustain life for a few days. Thekmor had been slowly dying when Zara found them. The being pointed to themselves, then to Zara, then made a gesture that clearly meant, why? Why had she helped? Why risk her own life for a complete stranger of a different species? Zara looked at the alien's crystalline features, at the intelligence and confusion in those faceted eyes. How could she explain that for humans this wasn't even a question? That seeing someone in need was reason enough to act? "Because you needed help," she said simply, "and I could give it." Thekmor stared at her for a long moment, then made a sound that might have been laughter or weeping. The bioluminescent patterns under their skin pulsed in complex rhythms, and Zara had the sense she was witnessing something significant, a moment of understanding across the vast gulf between species. Outside the cavern, the wind continued to howl. Zara's supplies were nearly exhausted, and her own body temperature was dropping dangerously low. But for the first time since the crash, she wasn't alone. And somehow, that made all the difference. As if reading her thoughts, Thekmor struggled to sit up despite their injuries. They pointed to the symbols on the wall, then to a section that looked like a communication array. The being's expression was urgent, hopeful. Together, they might find a way to survive. Together, they might even find a way home. The bond of survival. The cavern had become their shared world over the past 18 hours. Zara watched as Thekmor's crystalline fingers traced patterns across the wall symbols, their bioluminescent veins pulsing in rhythm with their concentration. The aliens' recovery had been remarkable once their core temperature stabilized, but Zara could feel her own strength ebbing with each passing hour. She'd given Thekmor her last nutrition bar that morning, claiming she wasn't hungry. The lie came easily, but the aliens' faceted eyes had studied her with uncomfortable perception. They seemed to understand more about human physiology than Zara had initially realized. Thekmor suddenly straightened, pointing excitedly at a section of the wall. They gestured for Zara to come closer, then began sketching additional symbols in the frost beside the existing markings. What emerged was clearly a schematic for some kind of amplification device. "Communication array," Zara murmured, recognizing the basic principles despite the alien design. Thekmor nodded vigorously, then pointed to various components around the cavern. What she had taken for natural ice formations were actually pieces of sophisticated technology, disguised by centuries of accumulated frost. Working together, they began to uncover the hidden equipment. Thekmor's injured arm limited their mobility, but they directed Zara to specific locations with patient gestures. Beneath layers of ice, she found crystalline matrices, harmonic resonators, and what appeared to be a power core that still held a faint charge. The assembly process took hours. Zara's engineering experience translated surprisingly well to Nexari technology, which seemed to operate on principles of harmonic resonance rather than traditional electronics. Thekmore's guidance was invaluable, their understanding of the equipment's quantum-level functions far beyond human science. As they worked, they developed their own form of communication. Thekmore learned basic human words with startling speed, while Zara began to recognize patterns in the aliens' harmonic speech. They shared stories through gestures and drawings, building understanding across the species barrier. Thekmore showed her images of their homeworld Nexara, where crystal cities grew from living rock and beings like themselves tended vast harmonic gardens. They spoke of Vex Nala, their bondmate, with harmonics that conveyed deep affection. The research mission to Keth 7 had been meant to last only days before the storm trapped them. In return, Zara described Earth's diversity, the concept of individual choice that drove human exploration, and the stubborn refusal to accept impossible odds that had carried humanity to the stars. Thekmore listened with fascination, their patterns growing brighter as they absorbed each new concept. "Your species," Thekmore said in carefully pronounced human words, "does not abandon others." "Most of the time," Zara admitted, "we're not perfect, but we try to do better." The alien's head tilted in that gesture she'd learned meant deep consideration. Perfect is static. Better is growth. It was a profound observation that stuck with Zara as they continued their work. The communication array was nearly complete, but the power requirements were enormous. The ancient core wouldn't provide enough energy on its own. Zara stared at the array, then at her own emergency beacon. The device she'd spent days repairing contained a concentrated power cell designed for extended transmission. If she removed it and integrated it with the alien technology, they might have enough power for a single powerful burst transmission, but it would mean destroying her only chance of signaling human rescue vessels. Thekmore seemed to sense her dilemma. They pointed to the beacon, then to themselves, making questioning harmonics. When Zara hesitated, the alien placed their uninjured hand over hers. "Together," Thekmore said clearly, "or not at all." The decision crystallized in that moment. Zara began dismantling her beacon, carefully extracting the power cell. Thekmore watched with what she was learning to recognize as profound respect, their bioluminescent patterns creating complex mandalas of light across their skin. The integration process required precise timing. Zara's human intuition for mechanical systems combined with Thekmore's harmonic attunement to create something neither species could have achieved alone. The hybrid device hummed with potential energy, its crystalline components resonating with the power cell's contained force. "Will it reach your people?" Zara asked. Thekmore made harmonics that seemed uncertain, then brightened. "We'll reach someone, better than silence." They activated the array together, Zara's hand over Thekmore's on the resonance control. The cavern filled with sound beyond human hearing, vibrations that seemed to penetrate the very structure of space. The transmission lasted exactly 47 seconds before the power cell exhausted itself. Then they waited. Hours passed in the dim cavern. Zara's body temperature continued to drop despite sharing warmth with Thekmore. The alien's own energy was failing as their injuries demanded resources their body couldn't spare. They huddled together near the dead power core. Two beings from different worlds united by the simple determination to survive. "Tell me about Vex Nala," Zara whispered, her voice weak but steady. Thekmore's patterns pulsed softly as they described their bondmate in harmonics and broken human words. A researcher like themselves, studying the quantum properties of living crystal. They had been planning to share the discoveries from Keth 7, to grow new harmonic gardens that could sing across interstellar distances. "Sounds beautiful," Zara murmured. "I hope you get to see them again." "Hope," Thekmore repeated, testing the human concept. "Trust in future unseen." Something like that. The alien was quiet for a long moment. "Humans hope often?" "All the time. Sometimes it's all we have." Thekmore made a sound that might have been wonder. Explains much about your species. The vibration started as barely perceptible tremor in the cavern walls. Zara felt it through the ice against her back, a rhythmic pulse that didn't match Keth 7's natural harmonic frequency. Thekmore's head snapped up, their patterns blazing with sudden excitement. Ships, the alien said urgently. Multiple vessels. Coming fast. Zara struggled to her feet, adrenaline overriding her exhaustion. Through the cavern entrance, she could see lights descending through Keth 7's atmosphere. But as they grew closer, she realized there were two distinct groups of vessels. The sleek, angular shape she recognized as human rescue ships. The others were organic curves of living crystal that could only be Nexari. Both species had received the transmission. The rescue was swift and efficient. Commander Roth of the human vessel. Determination found them first, his team following Zara's emergency transponder to the cavern. But when they discovered Thekmore, the situation became delicate. Step away from the alien engineer Voss, Roth ordered, his weapon trained on the crystalline being. No, Zara said firmly, positioning herself between the commander and Thekmore. They saved my life, we saved each other. Thekmore struggled to stand despite their injuries, harmonics filled with distress. They weren't afraid for themselves, Zara realized. They were afraid the humans would hurt her for helping them. Commander, Zara said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had stared death in the face and chosen compassion instead. This being is under my protection. They're injured and peaceful. Lower your weapon. Roth hesitated, his training warring with the obvious bond between the human engineer and the alien. Before he could decide, new harmonics filled the cavern as Nexari rescue teams arrived. The crystalline beings moved with fluid grace, their patterns communicating in rapid, complex sequences with Thekmore. What followed was the most delicate first contact scenario in human history. Two rescue teams facing each other across a cavern with Zara and Thekmore at the center. The tension was palpable until Thekmore did something unexpected. They began to sing. The harmonics that emerged were unlike anything the Nexari had heard before. Thekmore was weaving human concepts into their song, translating ideas of cooperation, sacrifice, and hope into frequencies their people could understand. They sang of Zara's choice to help a dying stranger, of human determination in the face of impossible odds, of the beauty they had discovered in a species that chose growth over perfection. The Nexari rescue team's patterns shifted, their bioluminescence creating new configurations as they processed this unprecedented composition. When Thekmore finished, the silence stretched for heartbeats before one of the Nexari began to respond with harmonics of their own. Commander Roth lowered his weapon. What are they saying? Zara looked at Thekmore, whose patterns had brightened, with something that could only be joy. They're saying yes, she translated. Yes to working together. Yes to learning from each other. Yes to building something better than either species could achieve alone. The rescue became something more than retrieval. It became the foundation of an alliance that would reshape both civilizations. Thekmore chose to accompany the human vessels back to Earth, becoming the first Nexari ambassador to humanity. Their songs of human courage and compassion would spread throughout Nexari space, opening diplomatic channels that had never existed before. Months later, as Zara stood in the crystalline halls of New Geneva Station, watching human and Nexari engineers work side by side on technologies that blended the best of both species, she thought about that moment in the cavern when she had chosen to help a dying stranger. Thekmore approached, their movements now graceful and pain-free, thanks to human medical technology combined with Nexari healing harmonics. Vexnala walked beside them, the bondmates' patterns creating gentle melodies of gratitude whenever they looked at Zara. The first joint expedition launches tomorrow, Thekmore said, their human speech now fluent though still touched with harmonic undertones. 12 worlds to explore, 6 human ships, 6 Nexari vessels. Together, Zara said, the word carrying all the weight of what they had built from a moment of simple kindness in an ice cavern on a forgotten world. Together, Thekmore agreed, their patterns blazing with the light of infinite possibility. Indy, the end. It hadn't been humanity's technology or military might that opened the stars to new alliance. It had been something much simpler and infinitely more powerful. The choice to see suffering and respond with compassion, to offer help without asking for reward, to believe that understanding was possible even across the vast distances between worlds. It was, Zara reflected, the most human thing of all, and perhaps that was exactly what the universe needed.